Hi, everyone. We are Oliver and Tillmann from Germany, from a company which has a quite cryptical name called OH22. And we have a little product that is called Header.io. And we want to give you, in the next 50 minutes, a little bit of an introduction on the one side on the product, but on the other side on topics of data quality and the reason why we built that kind of product. Because normally we are both two MVPs for the data platform from Germany. We are running the German data platform community, so we do a lot of consulting, and this kind of product comes out of this kind of experience. So what we want to show you is how you can integrate that product in your own data quality processes. So let's start a little bit with some kind of theory. So first of all, what you have is always the question, hey, what is data quality? And it can have different ways of impacting yourself, and it's never something that is equal. So when we are in our projects with customers, it's always like, one customer has a different view on data quality and his data than the other. But the main important thing is that from our perspective, that data quality means that your data is fit for use. What does it mean? It means that you can use the data for your business purpose. And most of the time, people think of, okay, yes, it's nice. We have that nice Power BI dashboard, for example, and then they're looking at the data and say, oh, why is that? Why are these kind of dimension items wrong? Why is there a misspell in the name or something like this? And by this, we will say, hey, maybe it's not really fit for use and fit for purpose. And this is something you need to change upfront, and there are different ways of looking at it. And one of the important things that we understood over the time was, and I don't know how about you, data quality is always thought the last. Most of the time, in a lot of projects, you want to have, let's say, a real fancy Power BI dashboard. It looks good, and this kind of 5 minutes to wow thing that Microsoft proposed. So everybody is looking to get the data, process the data, and display the data. And data quality comes most of the time last. And also from an investment perspective, it's like this, that companies do not really invest in data quality in the end, because maybe it's a little bit boring, it's not seen directly, because it's not some kind of fancy report in a nice color scheme. Yeah? So our take is that most companies had not really prioritized the topic of data quality on their agenda. But data quality can really cause a lot of problems in the end. And I guess what I'm just talking about is something that you know, that you may do wrong decisions on data because you maybe didn't see the right values in the right format, aggregated correctly, etc. Maybe you lose some kind of information. Maybe you fail your project because after all, you see that report and then you see, oh, the data is wrong, and then you have to correct the whole data pipeline to correct the kind of data issues you have, and maybe your project fail, etc., etc. So if you look at some of these kind of problems, there are some kind of numbers for this. I don't want to go into detail, but also things like 555 hours lost in selling time due to poor prospect data. And I think maybe you also receive any kind of email letters or something like this, pronouncing your name wrong, or even you don't get any kind of service requests from your dealership or something like this. So there are a lot of problems that poor data quality can produce. Now, what we want to do is just a simple sample to show you what this could be like. And you see there is this kind of dynamics icon, and it pushes the data out of Dynamics with Azure Synapse and loads it into Power BI, and everything looks good. Okay, for German, because these are all German cities, but maybe you know Munich or so on. Now you get another CRM system like Salesforce, and you get this data into Azure Synapse, and now your report looks a little bit different, because you now have Munich, you have now Cologne in there, and you have the German description in Munich, München, and Cologne. So now your report looks maybe right or maybe wrong, you don't know, but it doesn't really reflect the numbers, so you cannot really distinguish, and you cannot decide on your graph what kind of revenue comes by the city. Yeah? And now you maybe get even some kind of Excel planning stuff, and you can also load that into Synapse, and then it's get even worse, because now you get not just cities, you maybe get Niederlande, so the Netherlands, into your graph, so it's even a different aggregate than a city. Yeah? So this is not right. And I guess all of you had made these kind of experience over the time. So what we thought is, how can we produce or program a product that helps you in this kind of case? Because, of course, you have things that you can do manually in Power BI. Maybe you add some kind of cool Power Query functionalities in there that checks some kind of these elements. But honestly, a real solution is nothing that Microsoft currently supplies. So there are other vendors who are doing that, but what we thought of is building a product that is integrated into Azure and that solves these kind of data quality problems at a quite easy way. So what we set up is a system that is creating a so-called knowledge base and has business rules, so that data can flow through these kind of knowledge bases and can be enriched, can be corrected, and having business rules that also can identify any kind of problems like what we saw before in the data. Yeah? And one of these elements is that what we thought of is, of course, we want to do it in Azure because we are a Microsoft partner, we are a Microsoft company. But what we want to do as well is to give you some more insights in it. So an extensive profiling to see and to understand your data was something that, from a design perspective, was quite important for us. And then what we thought of is, okay, we put that in Azure, we will supply a quite nice web UI to give you the possibility at scale to work on that. What we thought of is that on the one side, especially with business rules, it could be some kind of easy business rules, like, okay, is this in a certain kind of range, the data, etc. But we also thought of things like, hey, do we have more complex things that are working together? So looking into the knowledge base, looking at the domains, how they interact together. And this is something that was also key for us. And in addition, and this is something that is part of our demo today, is we thought of how to integrate that into your normal Microsoft workload. Because most of the time you have these functionalities that you have these kind of third-party products, and you have to load the data into it. And we thought of a different way of doing it and integrate this into the data tools that you're working every day with, so Databricks and Synapse, etc., to do this. With this, we introduced, in addition to this, the kind of business rules. I already said that we also supply some kind of more complex rules, like, for example, contains and so on, quite easy, but we also have regex in there. We have some kind of lookup functionalities in there. So you can apply a lot of quite complicated scenarios where you want to prove your data if it's right or not. And with this, we have a quite nice editor where you can put that into any kind of hierarchy, any kind of workflow. You can also refer other domains, so you can look up something that is in one domain, like street, and then you look into, let's say, the postcode or something like this. And we will demonstrate that in a second. So you see, for example, for these kind of business rules, that you have a kind of flow through it. So if something fails, you will check it in a different way. If something is correct, maybe you have another step of doing it in this case. So in the end, the whole logic of your data quality problem or something that you would like to prove is quite easily visual displayed. Now, let's have a look how this works.
Okay, so let's have a quick introduction into Head.io. So this is our web UI for Head.io. And as you can see here on the left side, we have different projects here you can create. And inside of a project, you can create something we call knowledge base. And you can think about a knowledge base like a table in a database. And each knowledge base has different domains. And I will switch here to maybe the yellow taxi trip. And as you can see here on the left side now, we have different domains. And a domain is like a column in a table. And for each domain, you are able to define members. And a member is a value which is correct, or what you define is incorrect, or it is a synonym of another value. So as you can see here, we have, hopefully you can see it good.
If you zoom in.
Yeah. So we have this red one, and this is marked as invalid. So every time if I get a 0 for this member, I mark this record as invalid. If I get the value CMT, I know this is a synonym of 5, and I will change the record to 5. And I can define all these members here directly inside my, my web UI, or I also have the possibility to define an external paquet file, which has to be a specific structure in it, but then I can reference also an external file where I store all my data, so I can prepare it upfront from a different integration process.
So referencing our problem from earlier, Munich and München.
Exactly.
So Munich would be a synonym for München if you just want to have a German report, or München would be the synonym for Munich if you want to have an English report. But what we have to do with the Netherlands? Netherlands would be an error because it is not a city, it's a country. So we would raise
mark
an error
it
on
as
that.
an error.
Exactly.
Yeah. And each time you run a process with Head.io, maybe you get new data which you don't have at the moment inside of your member list. You can import it from the last run, so that you can that your knowledge base learns each time you use it. And this is the basic part of members here. Then we have these rule books, which Oliver showed before, and I will now go here maybe to another part. And I can jump to rulebooks. There are no rulebooks inside. And then I can go here to edit version. And this is a small information here from our side. Each knowledge base, each rules are versionized. And you can create a new version, and the old one is still active. And at the moment you like to use a new version, you can publish it, and then it will be used in your projects.
Yeah, so for example, the data steward can still enhance the knowledge bases and the application itself. And the users will still see the process of the old version, and then you can publish it, let's say, into production later on, and then it will integrate it into the processes.
Exactly. I will now create a new rule book. I just call it size, save it, and then I directly have here one business rule in my rule book, and it's called size, and I can create here a rule, a simple one, and maybe here I will say, okay, I need a size, and for that it should match a regular expression, and I can say this should be 920 and not printed, and it should be this case. So I can enter a regular expression for that and define that each value for this column or for this domain should be matches to this regular expression. And I can also add another condition and say, okay, this should be valid and also this should be valid. And I can add here a lot of different conditions to that. I can also add subconditions, and again here different conditions, so the editor has really the possibility to build real complex business rules for you, that how you define what is correct for your data and what is incorrect. Here we have these rules inside. As you can see here, character blacklist, contains, and so on. It's a lot of different rules. And you get different rules based on the data type you have. So if this is now here for the size, these are business rules for strings. And if I choose now a domain which is an integer, I get special rules for integers and so on. Okay. And I can also go here over that, rule books, trip validation, build these complex graphs, complex business rules. So each business rule has two outputs. One is for correct, so it's my expectation, what I defined in the business rule, and it's incorrect. And then you can build these complete flow, and the data will go through it, and each time one business rule is false, the complete record is set to false. You can't bring a record back to valid. If it's invalid, it's invalid, but it goes here through the complete workflow. But we have these different colors here with orange and the blue ones. And the orange ones are just logical business rules. So that does not mark your record as invalid or valid. It just decides, go to the left or to the right side, and then it goes through this complete part. And so, yeah, will validate all the data in it.
So you can also react on certain kind of stages and react with your business rule to certain kind of conditions. And sometimes with data quality, it's really like this, that you have to understand first incoming condition, and then you have to decide how you handle further tests on this kind of data. And the system will help you to visualize this and also to create these kind of complex conditions.
Exactly. I will now just go back here to my demo. Oh, I deleted it. No. There. What you can additionally do is here you can also add actions. So you can also go in this process to validate data and also define actions on top of that, so that you have small transformations, so you can directly correct your data if you know, okay, I know this error, and if I see it, I can act on that and define my action and correct the data.
Yeah, but this kind of correction is, just to give you this kind of idea, it's always a little bit of a danger, because maybe you get this kind of problems all the time from your source systems, and you correct this with our tool, but the intention for really good data quality would be to allow at the root to correct this kind of problem. But sometimes maybe you have an SAP system where you have no possibility to change the data, so that's the reason why we place these kind of actions in there, that you have the possibility to correct information.
Exactly. So these rule books are working on a row level basis. So, but sometimes you need specific business rules which are working on the whole data set you're checking at the moment. For that, we have data set rules, and a data set rule has a possibility to check my domain. Maybe we can also use the product ID. and then I can act on specific aggregates based on the whole data set. So I say, okay, the minimum value of my product ID, okay, it makes no sense at the moment here, but the minimum value should be 80 or something like that, and the maximum should be something like that.
Or something like all unique, where you maybe
Sure.
pump the data into a dimension, and it's your surrogate key, and you want to check if this kind of thing is really unique, so that in the end, when it will be loaded into the data warehouse, you do not have any kind of problems.
Yeah, but what we found out, what is often important, is something like percentage of missing values. So it may be okay if you have in a specific domain some null values inside, but if these numbers of null values or missing values here increase, that you have more than 20%, then throw an error for that.
Mm-hmm. So there's a question. A common data quality problem is ensuring you are correctly synchronized with your source systems. Yes. You didn't miss any rows that were present. Do you have anything to address this problem? Asking the question because it's a big problem at my company and difficult to solve. So, for Phil, do we have any parts on that?
I have to read the question again.
Okay, so what's maybe we will postpone that, because you will see later on when we integrate our solution in the pipeline of loading the data. There we will maybe give an answer on that.
Exactly.
Because the function, we do not have any kind of comparison in there in the quality product that does a row count or something like this, but this is something you can do in the integrating part.
Exactly. So at the moment, we just showed the head.io user interface and your definition of knowledge bases and domains and what is correct and what is incorrect. But it's completely uncoupled to your data at the moment. It's just a definition of what is correct.
Yeah, it's just the metadata of your data quality, so to say. Yeah.
Exactly. So, and these you're defining here in head.io, and maybe not you, because this is not something which the data engineer has to do. It could also something which the data steward can do.
Exactly.
Or something from the business, and not really the data engineer. Okay.
Now, if we look into something like what can we do to apply this to your normal data streams, within Header, we had the idea from an architectural perspective. We had a version Header 1 where we put that into Excel and thought, oh yeah, this is something, especially for the integration with Power BI, etc., where you can do this. We had already a system that is writing a Power Query, M statement, etc., etc. But then in the process of working with our clients, we thought, oh, okay, maybe this is a little bit too small, and maybe we need to scale, because loading this all into our engine, etc., is something that takes a lot of time, especially when you're talking about million of rows, when you're talking about something that you do on the data engineering side in your lakehouse, going from bronze, silver to gold, etc., etc. And then we thought, it would be good to apply all the metadata that we now have described and we have set up in our knowledge bases and in our rule book, to apply this to the process where you are currently working on. So what we thought of is that bringing these kind of definitions to the data stream, to the pipeline itself. Yeah? And that's what we did. And is there another question? No, okay, so let's go further. So what we try to establish is something that we build so-called runners. So these are engines that will be placed in the part where you are working with the data. So for example, if you are working with Azure Synapse and you have a notebook, or you're working with Databricks and have a notebook that you can use, for for example, PySpark, to leverage our knowledge base and rule engine. Or you are working with .NET and you want to work on that in a kind of application, etc. So we built these kind of different runners, and these are able to work with a meta definition of header at the point in your system. So we use the power, for example, of Databricks, and not the power of any kind of things that is included into header. And you see that here in the graphics. You see on the, for you, it's on the left side, you see the configuration. Yeah? And then we push this kind of configuration into our runners, and then you can execute that and reference that, for example, in your Spark environment, and store the results, for example, again in your data lake. So you do not have to do anything in header. The only thing that we push back to our system is statistics. So we want to understand the data quality, and we want to capture the data quality for the data steward to understand the actual situation. And maybe we just do a demo on that, or?
Yes, we will just do a demo on that. This is just a small video about how we can use header in a .NET Interactive notebook as an example with our widget we showed after that with the statistics.
You show that live.
Yes, let's show that live. So,
Oliver.
Yeah.
I have a question.
You have a question. You are a helper. Helpers should not have questions. Come on. Okay, let's go.
How does this affect on the performance? Because you're saying that you do a single row. You're calling the Spark with a single row or in Data Factory. So how does it do it with the performance? If you do have like 3 million rows or on inserting, is it row by row, or how I have to see that?
So
it's based on the runner you are using. Yeah. So if we are using the PySpark runner, Spark runner, then it's completely running in Spark and Batch and on different nodes. If you are using the single row processing runner, then you process row by row. Then you will send 3 million records to the single row processing runner and process each row.
Yeah, but I think Erwin will see it if you just call the notebook, that it is in a similar fashion like you are normally working, let's say, with Python on data in your notebooks. You're just referencing another library, and you get this kind of information.
Exactly.
Oh, I think you have to make this really big.
I will do it.
Yeah.
So this is Databricks notebook, and what you can see here at the beginning is that we just load our Python wheel for PyHeader IO. And then in the next cell, we are referencing these PyHeader libraries, and that we can use it in our notebook. In this example, as you can see here, we are just using the open dataset from Microsoft to load this New York taxi dataset. And the important part for us is here, it's the header IO part. And this is what you have to do to send the data to header and to integrate header and all the different rules into your process. So first of all, you have to create the header library or the base part, and that you define the URL for the web service and our API key, so you can create it in the portal. Then you have to define the project you like to use and the knowledge base, and then what is your data? And this is here with the part data, so this is my data frame inside of my notebook. And then I'm defining something which I didn't explain before. It's called a run. This is this one. And a run is something like a container where I also defined my mapping, so that I define the mapping from my data set, what I have here, to the domains inside of header, so that I don't need to define it here directly in the notebook. I can define it in the header UI, and so with defining this run, I add it here. And that's all I have to do to configure header IO to use it in the notebook. and after that, I just say header start, and then I store the results in my object result, and the Spark Runner goes through the data. I get all the output here for the different actions he's doing, and at the end, I get our widget, and I can just go through the widget and look for the overall information. I can go to the domains, what I have for the member search, or data type validation where I have errors in it. I can go through the business rules, and I can go through so in this way to all of the different rules and actions I did before inside of head.io and have it here as an output.
Yeah, we have another question, but first, just want to assure that, Irvin, your question is addressed. So with this kind of Spark runners we integrate that at that scale that you have, for example, in your Synapse environment or in your Databricks cluster or something like this, because we then push it down to the nodes and then it can work on scale. We have other scenarios which we will show later on where we have this kind of single row processing. It's more like a kind of, let's say, dialogue. It's a kind of transactional thing that we are working with, which Tilman will introduce. For the previous question with regards to how can we see if the data is, let's say, the same kind of data that comes from the source system, and if the data quality system has catched all of that, yeah, this is something header is not really aware of, because it just says, hey, we are applying our rules into your process. So if you take data from system A and push it into system B, we are just in the middle, and we do not have any kind of information about how many records you are pushing through the system. The only thing that we can supply is, based on our statistics that we are sending back in our process, you know exactly how many records we have. We will show that later on in terms of the profiling and so on, because there we give you some kind of deep dive information, how your data frame is set up, how many numbers do we have. And now we have another question.
Exactly. To the question, so are you able to also create integration tests, for example, when you need to compare source system with your data, and to which systems are you able to connect? Last question first. We do not connect directly to a system. We use or you build the connection inside the tool you're using with head.io. So if you're using Spark, you can connect to each system which your Spark environment can connect to. So if you're using maybe Synapse with the SQL connector, you can just connect to a SQL database. If you're using Databricks, maybe you can connect to, I don't know,
Amazon S3, whatever.
Yeah, exactly, and load the data from there. We are just taking the data frame inside of the notebook and working on that data frame. And how you create the data frame, that is based on your environment and how you create these data frames. Are you able to also create integration tests? Yes, somehow. So we have a Spark, we have a function which is called a web runner. So one of our runners, web runner. And you can just call the web runner through a REST API and say, okay, here's my file, please validate it with this project and with this knowledge base. And then you can get back all the statistics from the REST API after validation. And this is something you can integrate also in your data ops pipeline to say, okay, I want to validate the following data before I push it from dev to test to prod. And for that, you can use it also to compare the original data or the values of the original data to the data which you have corrected. Okay, so this is the integration here in Databricks. I will jump over to Synapse and show you that is similar. It's just that here I use another project and another knowledge base, but then it's similar. It's the same 5-6 rows I have to create in the notebook. here again, I have my data frame data, and then I use header.start to start it inside of my notebook and to run it. The difference here is that the output looks a little bit different, but that's based on the Spark environment. But again, here I have my my widget with all the different statistics in it for the business rules and so on. Okay, so that is the integration in Spark. Now I like to show you some more real-life example, or not real-life, more real demo. This is a Visual Code with a polyglot notebook. So it's, the former name was .NET Interactive, now it's Polyglot Notebooks. And here we have integrated our .NET runner. I load them here up front. And then I load my data. It's a simple Parquet file, which I'm loading here. And then I also define my header IO information. Maybe I can just execute that. Execute this one here. And the system is executing everything. And now I just say result, and I get my widget with the statistics. So everything is now running here directly on my machine. The business rules were loaded from our web UI to my local machine, and the data is processed directly here in my notebook.
So to round that up, that there, in this kind of system, the metadata is always the same kind of thing, but we have these kind of runners that really are dedicated to the work your data engineers or your developers doing in the pipeline. So they even don't have to understand the data quality problems that just maybe the data steward or the business more or less propose. They do their pipelines, they do their technical stuff, but the content and the way how these rules are working is only something that in 5 lines of code they apply to it.
Exactly.
And you showed a sign that there's another question? No?
But there's no question.
I will.
Oh, you have that question.
I don't have a question, but it's a question from one of the virtual attendees, but it's not showing up on your.
Oh, okay, got it.
So this is a question from Klaus. Can we check for the state transition constraints? So when a row presents a start of a customer, a change in the subscription, and then the customer leave. So no change must be found in the data for the customer after leave unless we get a new record started, a new started record. So that's more like the SCD2 or historical part, I think.
I didn't get that, to be honest. I didn't get that. What?
I'm trying to submit it again.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe we can then get back later to that question.
Yep.
So what we showed here is just the statistics, but at some point you also like to work with the data you have corrected. And for that, here we have some examples. As maybe seen before, I always say result like header.start. And now I get into the object result, and I can say with get data, I can load from this object maybe all invalid data or all valid data. Or I can also say, give me all the data which failed for a specific business rule. And I can store them in another object and work with this data. So maybe I have here the corrected rows compare, and I can execute that here, and they should be the same. And then you can see here, I get my data back, and I see here that it get back with Luxembourg and Luxembourg, so different spelling for that. So the data was corrected from my system automatically, and I can compare it here manually what has changed. And the important part here is, if I now go to my head.io instance, and I have to go to this one, people, and go into my domain country, and I can search for Luxembourg and all the main, as you can see here now, Luxembourg, and you will see that Luxembourg is a synonym or the values 442, LU, LUX are synonyms of Luxembourg. But what is not inside is the wrong spelling of Luxembourg. And that's why, because we defined here in our domain that we need a specific fuzzy search algorithm, Levenstein, for that. And so if I send my data through this member search, in the background, we use the Levenstein algorithm to check the incoming value to the defined valid values. And so the system understands, okay, Luxembourg was spelled incorrectly and changed it automatically to the valid one which I have defined upfront in my member search. And these things, or these algorithms here, I can define during the definition of my domain. So we have different fuzzy algorithms inside so that you can use the best algorithm for your data. Maybe that at some point Levenstein is not enough. You can use something like the Cologne phonetics or double metaphone.
Or any kind of distance on the keyboard, because you maybe work with data from production where people just in rush have to key in stuff. Yeah? And this is completely different to something that you get maybe from a different system or something like this, where you maybe have a phonetic problem. Yeah? Here you have maybe a typo thing. And the data steward can really adjust this to the optimum way and apply the algorithm to it.
Exactly. So we have around 10, 12 different algorithms. We are working continuously on that to extend it with algorithms for different languages and scenarios, so you can use always the best for your environment.
For example, there are special algorithms for Eastern languages, which maybe fit better because your business problem or your data quality is related to any kind of stuff that you're doing with systems that have Eastern language included.
Exactly. And you can also just say valid rows, and then you get the valid rows, and this is the same structure as you put into the system. You get out of the system, but with corrected data. And everything which is incorrect is not in there, so you can maybe in your process move on with the valid data, with the original structure, and then after that you can use the invalid records in another process to store it somewhere, to send it back to data steward, or something like that.
Yeah. And one of the ideas behind this is just to say, we try to keep it as flexible as possible. So you, as a data engineer, you can decide and you can just switch what you want to do with this in your notebook, in your process that you want to work with. Because based on our experience, it's always be different how companies are working with the data, with wrong data. Some of them just keep it away, some of them just store it, some of them want to push that back to customer service or something like this. So all of these things we do not want to incorporate into the product. We just want to say, hey, you have this kind of tool set which is working in your data pipeline, and in your data pipeline you decide where you want to go with the wrong data or with the correct data.
Exactly. And to come a little bit back to the runners, so with the different runners we've created, you have the possibility to integrate it into Spark. You can use it in Polyglot notebooks in Visual Code. It's a .NET runner, so you can create every application you like with .NET and integrate our .NET runner into your application and directly validate the data. We have this single row processing runner, which is an Azure function where you can send one row to it and it will be validated and you get it back.
Maybe the use case for that is, for example, if you have, let's say, a CRM system and you want to do this on a transactional base. Yeah, you not want to run a batch process that takes the data from one system to the other, and you just want to apply this kind of rule set for the current record that you are working in your CRM system, for example. This is exactly for it. Yeah, because in some cases, you are really trying to get the data quality right in the system of the source, and therefore you can do this. Now you have the question?
Yeah, I come back to it. Come back to it later.
Okay.
Then we have
a nice notebook.
Can you read it also? Then we have the web runner with Spark and with the .NET runner, so we can execute it directly with the REST API, so that you have the most possibilities to integrate header into your products or into your data integration pipelines, but always with just defining the rules in the web UI and executing on your data where your data is. And so you get the rules to your data, and then you can execute it there. The question here is, can we check for state transition constraints? So when row represent a start of a customer, a change in subscription, and then customer leave, no change must be found in data for customer at leave unless we get a new start record. So that means, how I understand it, that you have different records which you can group together, and then you have to find information in that. That's something at the moment we can't.
No.
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 No. I have to think
But I still think that this is something that you can apply in your data pipeline.
Yeah.
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 And there you can react on based on the output that happens in the system itself. Yeah.
Okay. So because we have less time, only 4 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so the last thing is we already talked about statistics, that we send these statistics from the runners back to header. Why are statistics important? Because you have to understand what's going on in your data quality, especially not just on the point, but also, let's say, from an historical perspective, so that you can track the ability, is your data quality increasing, decreasing, where are the problem fields, what do we have to do, and all of these kind of informations are going back to the header system. So there's another question. Yeah, that's good. All right, all right. So here we go. Do and taste data quality at analytical.
You have to repeat.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Did I say I always repeat? Okay.
Yeah.
So the question is, do you have a way to test data quality at the analytical model level? So that means a Power BI data set or something like this. For example, testing a measure is still valid after modeling a change. Not yet.
Not directly, no.
Not directly. No. We don't work with anything that is part of, let's say, a semantic model in terms of aggregates, etc. The only thing that we supply are some stuff with regards to the business rules that are on data set level, where we can say, hey, the sum or the number of entries have to have a certain kind of result set. But I think this question goes into the direction saying, hey, if I model my KPI incorrect and have now incorrect values, so creating any kind of incorrect stuff with that, is there a possibility to do this?
If you can load the data into your data frame in Spark or in the .NET runner, you are able to validate it.
Exactly. Yeah, you can compare that.
Yeah.
And there will be maybe somewhere in the next time other possibilities that we can use, but we cannot talk about that at the moment. Yeah. All right.
Okay, so back a little bit to the statistics. Yeah. So these are statistics I showed a little bit.
1 minute.
Demo.
1 minute. Just
and can you show me? Not at the moment,
no.
Because we're running out of time. But if you're interested, we have a booth upstairs. Just came over, and we will show you everything what you like to see.
But with regards to the statistics, we will have some additional sessions tomorrow where we show this kind of statistic part.
Exactly.
So you don't lose anything if you have time. And we have another product as well for data loading, which is not an ETL tool, which is more a kind of self-service data loading tool with a lot of compliance functionalities in, which is called Woody.io. And we have these 2 sessions tomorrow. Would be happy if you join us. Yeah? And again, thank you for your audience. And if you have any questions, just join our booth. We have a lot of sweeties with us, so don't get us with a full bus back to Germany. So come on and get all this kind of swag and have fun with Secret Bits. Thank you very much for your audience.